This video is dedicated to James Humphreys. James, thank you. Adeline Resplendent Cathar versus Tovolar Dire Overlord, Atraxa Praetor's Voice, and Chainer Nightmare Adept. Decent hand for us, a decent curve, no ramp unfortunately, but we can play everything that's in our hand at least. Just a land from Atraxa and the Werewolf player going for Kessig Prowler. We'll play out the tap land and pass. Goblin Lackey for Chainer, which suggests that this is a Rakdos Goblin list. Then an Arcane Signet and a Gruul Signet for the other two players. We will play out... oh jeez, I've played the wrong 2-mana creature. Oh, that feels bad. Played out the Thalia's Lieutenant instead of the Hanweir. Ugh. Well, starting as I mean to go on, hopefully not. Goblin Lackey swings in towards the only open player in Atraxa, and that allows them to get a Goblin into play. And that is Siege Gang Commander. It's about as good as you can hope to do, really. Atraxa coming into play on turn 3 thanks to the Arcane Signet. And then it is a little bit of ramp and a Tovolar from the Werewolf player. We draw into another human in Mangara, not another land yet, unfortunately. I think it would be a decent time to get our commander into play. No decent attacks for us yet, unfortunately. Now a Sensation Gorger, which could be some decent card advantage for the Goblin player, depending on how many Goblins they've got in that deck. And now Atraxa going for Spread the Sickness, and that went onto the Goblin that just entered play. Now the Werewolf player going straight into the red zone, both of which are attacking Atraxa, so you would assume they've got a combat trick here. Atraxa does have Death Touch, don't forget. Atraxa assuming the same as well, so letting it through, they will draw 2 cards. And then it is a Lurking Predators from the Werewolf player. Smothering Tithe for us, can't play that until we've got another Plains to play. So let's just go for the buff. We'll play the Radiant Destiny. +1/+1 on humans. This is a human tribal list, by the way. Lurking Predators whiff there. Lurking Predators whiff there, thankfully. Let's swing in towards the Goblin player and the Werewolf player. We'll get some human tokens into play, 1 per opponent that we have, so that will buff our 2-mana creature. And we'll lose all but 1 of these tokens, I think. Gonna feed the Atraxa player some life. So the Atraxa is the only one that blocked there, so we get to keep 2 of these human tokens. And there's a Dark Ritual from the Rakdos player. Going straight in for the Chainer Nightmare Adept, but still deciding to hold back with all those creatures. Yeah, if I played the Militia Captain when I should have done, we could have had that transform during next turn's upkeep. Anyhow, Atraxa going for Gave Guru of Spores. And they do get into a free creature this time, Daybreak Ranger. That will transform into the big Fight Wolf. And now Atraxa swinging in towards us, not worried about the werewolves apparently. And then it's over to Tovolar's turn. They will transform all of their human werewolves. And then it is Mizium Mortars. That is overloaded for 6, so 4 damage to all the other creatures. Gets rid of Atraxa. We keep both of our creatures. Thankfully, thanks to the Radiant Destiny. Wiping out all those goblins though. And now we still have to worry about the Nightfall Predator. I think that should go after the Gave really, but I've got a feeling it'll go after our commander. So the commander goes in towards the Rakdos player. And the Eldrazi Werewolf goes in at Atraxa, hopefully. They will block with the Gave, but I imagine they'll put a Saproling into play. It looks like that is exactly what they're doing. This is why you need to worry about Gave, because it can be really tricky to get combat sorted out with that in play, as well as all the other combos and stuff. So getting rid of their werewolf creature with a block. And yeah, what did I say? They fight our commander instead of the Gave, even though Gave just proved to them how tricky it can be in combat. So getting rid of the Adeline. We draw into a land though at least, so we'll drop the land, and I think it has to be straight in for the Smothering Tithe. Let's swing in first. We'll go in towards the Werewolf player. Wanted to swing in first because when we cast Smothering Tithe, they might get a blocker into play here. Perforose God of the Forge being cast by the Chainer player, and that got the Werewolf player into Lambholt Pacifist. Now Atraxa coming back into play again with 1 mana held up for that Gave. And they just decide to make a Saproling straight away, so no combat tricks there. In Search of Greatness this time. And then we've got both of these werewolves coming in towards us, so does Adeline have a really bad reputation or something? Seems as though we're the player to worry about for some reason. Maybe Smothering Tithe is doing that alone. Anyway, they're drawing cards, so feeding us more mana with the Smothering Tithe. Although deciding to pay for that. But we get into another land anyway. So let's start trying to draw some more cards here. Let's go for Vanquisher's Banner. Get our opponent into another werewolf, and it's a good one. And it's Henweir Militia we should have had in play already, but I did misplay straight out of the gates, unfortunately. We'll continue to trade blows back and forth. We'll swing in towards the werewolf player with the now vigilant 9/9. And they decide to block with the werewolf that they just got. That is the Gaia Reach Bandit. And because we cast 2 spells last turn, their creatures will transform back into humans. And Atraxa, playing a spell, gets our werewolf friend into Lord of the Ulvenwald. So doing really well with that Lurking Predators. Ajani Mentor of Heroes is what the Atraxa player cast. Gave making another Saproling. And then the Ajani put 2+ counters on Atraxa and 1 on the Gave. And this time Atraxa swings in towards the werewolf player, so putting them at 10 commander damage with the Atraxa. Well, there's one you don't see very often from the werewolves player, a Chaos Sphere. Creatures with flying can block only creatures with flying, and creatures without flying have reach, so it basically switches off flyers. And then Tovalar and his army, turning everything in sideways here. That will generate some mana with the Anthem. And all of them going in towards Atraxa, that's fine with me. If players aren't worrying about us so much anymore. But going to block with some Saprolings and Gave regardless. So it is the fight creature that is getting through for some combat damage here. Then in response to blocks, Gave will sacrifice one of the Saprolings to put a plus counter on itself again. They will still have to worry about trample potentially. Okay, and they do target one of their creatures with the trample from the Torvalar. And once again, one of the Saprolings going down, and that will put a plus counter on the Atraxa. So Atraxa now an 8/8 with Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch and Lifelink, of course. So throwing the Lord of Ulvenwald away there, surprisingly, so the buff will go, and they get 2 creatures through. So Tovalar will trigger twice, draw them 2 cards. So round to our turn we go now. That's a battalion creature that will give indestructible when we swing in with that and 3 other creatures. I think it's time to start thinking about the Divine Visitation, because we do have a token generator in our hand. So that can make some nice angels for us. Then with our big +1 counter creature, we'll carry on going in towards the werewolf player, and the smaller creature can go into the left at the Chainer player. And I think with this surplus of mana we'll be able to get our Adeline back into play. That triggers our Vanquisher's Banner to draw us a card. Lurking Predators triggers as well, but they whiff on that. So I'm hoping we'll have 3 mana before the end of our next turn thanks to Smothering Tithe, and we'll be able to generate some angels. They would be human tokens, of course, but thanks to the angel enchantment, they will be angels. We cast 2 spells there, so the werewolves flip back round to humans. And that Chainer isn't having the best of luck, unfortunately. 3 cards in hand and just tapping out again, so once again they become werewolves instead of humans. Yeah, that's a pretty scary one. Tamiyo Field Researcher. And there is a Thrumming Bird for more proliferation. Then Tamiyo Field Researcher, whenever our big creature and the Atraxa deal damage, they'll draw cards. And at some point, the werewolf player has got Reckless Waif. Atraxa trying to finish off the werewolf player here, but forgetting entirely about the Chaos enchantment, so they will be able to chump block thanks to that Free Lurking Predators creature. That has reach thanks to that enchantment. If they'd gone wide on them there with the Gave as well, they would have been able to take them out, I imagine. Anyway, drawing a card with the Tamiyo. And then proliferating on a bunch of stuff. And then at the beginning of the werewolf player's upkeep, it becomes day because the Atraxa player casts 2 spells, but Tovlar should flip everything back round again. It should become night again here, and it does. But they didn't choose to transform the other human werewolves for whatever reason. Anyway, deciding to continue to turn everything in towards the Atraxa player regardless. So Gave making some saprolings to block with. Now they've got more creatures in play here, so I think it's a good opportunity to go for Call of the Coppercoats before they lose any in combat. They've also tapped down some blue mana. So let's point Call of the Coppercoats at the Atraxa player. And there we go, we get 5 angels instead of 5 humans. So that should help us deal with some of the planeswalkers. And the chain has seen enough thanks to all of our angels, I think, so deciding to call it a day there. One of the saprolings is blocking. It is blocking the Tovolar, so they decided to give that double strike and trample. Oh, I see, giving it double strike from the Temur Battle Rage. So drawing 3 cards here because they did hit with all 3 of their creatures. Gives us more Smothering Tithe triggers. And now at the beginning of our upkeep, finally transforming the Hamweir Militia Captain. That will turn into a cleric that generates some more creatures. Speaking of which, Gave decides to remove another plus counter, and that is another saproling for them. Now, getting everything into the Tamiyo is the way to go here, I think. So let's go straight through to combat. Adeline can go in at the werewolf player. The militia captain can go in there as well, just in case they can remove that somehow. And then I think all of these angels can go in... Do we just go straight in at the Atraxa player? We've got Generous Gift now for the Tamiyo, so I think all the angels going in at the Atraxa player is okay. And we'll send Thalia's Lieutenant in at Atraxa as well. Only 2 angels being made by the Adeline here because we've only got 2 opponents. Oh, but that kind of ruins this combat. Yeah, there's a fog from the werewolf player. That's Moon Mist. Transform all humans and prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn by creatures other than werewolves and wolves. Noteworthy that that does transform our militia captain back from a cleric over to its front side. So we won't be getting a free angel at the end of this turn. So let's go for the frontline medic here. If we have 2 other creatures attack with it, our creatures will gain indestructible. That will make combat really easy for us. And then we can introduce the monarchy here as well, I think. Palace Jailer comes into play. I'm actually only just realising that we don't have snow permanents in the deck. Yeah, should have snow lands instead of the basic lands. Whoops. That is a human when we animate it, but won't be able to animate it without snow mana. Anyway, we'll play another human into the Vanquisher's banner, so it will cantrip, and we can introduce the monarchy with Palace Jailer. Palace Jailer can get rid of the Gave Guru of Spores. It should have been out of play already, I think. We draw into another land with the monarchy. The werewolves turn back round into humans because we cast multiple spells. Oh, and I forgot all about the Khan's Bastion. We need to hope that our opponent doesn't have counter magic here. Then let's go for Generous Gift. That goes on to the Tamiyo. Yeah, I thought we were safe to wait on the Generous Gift, but should have done it during my turn. Gave our opponent an Instigator Gang for casting the Generous Gift. Yeah, it looks like they've got an answer. Heroic Intervention. Yeah, that feels bad. Our opponent's going to get some card draw and an Omniscience here. The only saving grace is that they don't have a grip full of stuff. But the Omniscience could soon do something about that. They'll have 4 cards and Omniscience. So there we go, minusing down the Tamiyo. They will get the emblem here. Minusing down the Ajani as well for 100 life. Not too worried about that. It's not actually as difficult to knock your opponent down from 100 as you might think. Obviously we'd rather they didn't get that 100 life though. Inexorable Tide. That comes down for free, as all their spells will. And once again, the Atraxa player forgetting about that Chaos enchantment. That saved them on multiple occasions here, so once again, the free creature spell being able to reach up to the Atraxa and keep themselves in play. Now we could help out our opponent here with Sigrid Godfavored. If they swing in with Tovlar and our opponent blocks with the Atraxa, we can get the Atraxa out of the way with the Sigrid, and then they can give it trample and a buff to get the lethal commander damage on there. I don't want to voice that plan to my opponent because they might have an answer, but hopefully that's what they do here. That's an interesting new one from the Innistrad set. Unnatural Growth will double the power and toughness of each creature you control until the end of the turn at the beginning of combat. Well, there we go. They did have counter magic in Arcane Denial. They get more proliferation every time they cast a spell. And then there's Immerwolf from the werewolf player. So that is a +1/+1 buff. Hopefully they turn sideways here. Oh wow, but the Atraxa player decides to scoop at that because Magic Online. Yeah. Well, I don't suppose we'll ever know what would have happened now. I think if the werewolf player had just decided to turn sideways against Atraxa with all their creatures, then they could have got that lethal commander damage through. And then we would have just swung in at the werewolf player with the angels, so yeah, don't know what Atraxa was doing there, but we'll play it out as best we can. So at the beginning of our upkeep, the Westvale cult leader will be transformed from the militia captain. We draw Lightning Greaves, play the land out for the turn, and I think we can respect our opponent's time and just turn everything in sideways here. Alright, I'm glad we've got Vigilance. They've got yet another combat trick here, Glorious End. End the turn, but at the beginning of your next end step, you lose the game, so yeah, I can't see them winning this one, but interesting to see all the little shenanigans that they've got in this werewolf deck. Playing Burning Inquiry. We drew and discarded a True Conviction, discarded the Mangara, and discarded the Austere command to that. Drew into Thalia's Lancers. There's quite a few legendary permanents in here that we can search up. One of which is the Immortal Sun that we can see in our hand there. A Saga comes into play that can turn their creatures into dorks. And they just decide to put a big buff with the rest of their mana on the Immerwolf. Turning that in sideways, we'll, just for the fun of it, cast the Sigrid, which, thanks to the Lurking Predators, gets them into Wolfear Avenger. Yeah, they've hardly missed with that Lurking Predators. Anyway, exile the Immerwolf away just in case they've got something to do with that. So that takes that out of combat, and they lose the game to their own card at the end of the turn. So that's that. Not sure how we would have ultimately dealt with the Atraxa player. Like I said, we might have dealt with them, or the Werewolf player might have dealt with them there. The Werewolf player might have dealt with them inadvertently, or we might have had to go into a 1v1 session. But we've got plenty of blockers, so yeah, maybe we could have pulled something out of the bag there, I'm not sure. Hopefully you all enjoyed this Adeline human tribal list anyway. I'm tribalkai on the EDH channel. Thank you for watching.